Hello, welcome to Cinema Savvy, and welcome back to Retro Reviews. We have finally made it to the final Rocky film, and we're saying final Rocky film, I guarantee, like a couple of years' time. There'll be another one out, and we'll have Creed 3, but as of right now, we are saying a fond farewell to the Rocky franchise. What was originally going to be planned to end with Rocky Balboa review, we decided to carry on with the Creeds, and we are at the last one now with Creed 2, 2018, directed by Stephen Caple Jr., and we're going to be talking about it. It's kind of a little bit bittersweet to hang up the gloves for the Rocky franchise because it's been a blast going week to week talking about these things. We started it like a month and a half ago now, and it's absolutely flown by. So yeah, we're going to be diving deep into it. We're going to be talking spoilers. We're going to have like a general discussion about the film. But before we do, we need to go over the socials.
Absolutely, guys. So as Chris said, it's a retro review. Do not take this personally. We know this is 2018. There's a review on our channel. This is more the completionist in both of us. We can't change the description. And to be fair, looking back with an insight 2 years later, it's going to make it very interesting. Mm-hmm. As a lot of people do say, you don't really watch film until you've sort of given it time. That being said, we always gone about social media as the best way to finding us. We've got a jam-packed few weeks. We've got something pretty incredible we find that's going to happen today, which we can't wait to share with you. So keep an eye out for that. And obviously, you'll know when you know. But the best way to find out what we're going to do is, of course, to find us on Facebook at Cinema Savvy and Twitter at Cinema_Savvy. We tend to announce things on there if we can. If there are embargoes, obviously they may drop after certain times with no knowledge. Hint, hint, wink, wink. And as well as this, we obviously want you guys to chat with us. We've loved discussing these with you. We've had a lot of comments, whether it be the Tron retro reviews, we've started the Karate Kid retros, but of course, the last 7 weeks with Creed, we weren't here to do, well, we weren't planning on doing Creed 1 and 2 as Chris said, but every week, you watch these films and then you get everyone commenting saying Creed this, Creed that, and it was that kind of nod like, we're going to do it, we're going to end with the Creed films, and here we are 7 weeks later to the day after our first Rocky review. We arrived with Creed 2, and if you're watching us, you can see that Adonis Creed behind us now template can feel the pain of knowing that we're going to be going away from talking Rocky for a while now, which is a shame, but as we said, retro reviews, there's so much opportunity. And we do have our Karate Kid reviews with part 2 coming on Christmas Eve this Thursday, the 24th of December. That will be up on the channel, and we'll do some more posts nearer the time for that. But we are fully into the Karate Kid reviews. That will also have reviews for Cobra Kai Season 1, Season 2, and Season 3. So a lot of things coming over a short space of time. So it's a great time to be a Karate Kid fan. And I'm very new to the franchise. So just to tease that, that's a really good dynamic for the show. But that being said, we're going to talk something else. We're going to talk Creed now. And also, sorry, we're finishing this with our ranking video. We're not going to go into it film by film by film, but me and Chris have each ranked the 8 between us. We're each going to go over our 8, and then that's our Creed list. So, yeah, that's going to be a really interesting dynamic too.
Yeah, we didn't have a ranking planned, and then I think I can't remember who commented last week when we did Creed 1 and was like, are you guys going to rank the 8? I think deep down we knew that we probably needed to at the end, to kind of sum up everything. We'll probably do that for big franchises as well as we go through them. But yeah, I actually have a story about this film. I have a memorable story about the first time I saw this film, which is quite nice. So I feel like I've been really boring with my first time stories on the Rocky franchise, which is quite depressing, really. But I do distinctly remember this one. So I believe I went to see this on the night of release. I went to Manchester for Manchester Comic-Con, and I always get there a day early, get a hotel room, and it's kind of my tradition. I think I've been like 2 or 3 times, and if there's any kind of big film playing, it's usually around the early December kind of time, I think, or mid-December. I always travel to Trafford Centre, if anyone knows it, Manchester, go to the cinema and check out a movie, whatever big releases at the time. And this was timed to perfection, because not only at the Comic-Con that I was going to was Apollo Creed going to be there. You had Bridget Nielsen there. And I think there was someone else. Was that just the 2?
Was it Dolph Lundgren? I didn't get it. Was it Dolph Lundgren?
Dolph Lundgren was at another one. Was it a separate one, I think? But anyway, 2 Rocky people. That was huge to me. I was like, that's good. You've got my price of admission alone for that. And it timed perfectly with the Creed 2 release. So I went there late at night. I didn't know what to expect. I was really excited for it because obviously the premise to this film is incredible. I don't have IMDb open at the moment to give the correct premise of the film, but it's really easy. It's the rematch 33 years in the making. It is Creed versus Drago once more, and that's all you guys need to know. So yeah, I was pumped for this movie. This was going to be another Rocky film in the cinema. It was actually kind of packed as well. I remember at the time there was a lot of people showed up for it, and it was fantastic. Rocky hype. Just, I guess, initial opinions before we get into it. I absolutely love this movie. I don't think I enjoy it as much as the first Creed film, there is an element missing, which we'll get into, and I'll try and deconstruct why I think that's the case as we go through it. So, instant Rocky hype, right? So, going into Comic-Con the next day, there is a certain person I was going to meet who I didn't realize was going to be in Creed 2, which was a nice surprise, and I'll get into that when I go over some of my favorite scenes or surprises of the film. So it was great to have that conversation as well with that person I was meeting about the film that I saw the day before, not knowing that they were going to be involved in it. So that was quite a nice little Rocky-filled weekend for me. A very expensive one, but had a good time. So that was my first time story with Creed 2.
I definitely can't give a story as good as that. This is one of the very few Rocky films I've seen at a cinema, if you want to call it a Rocky film. I was in London at the time, and I think I was trying to remember I was watching my sister yesterday. I don't remember if we got told off. So I think it might have been my mum's birthday weekend, and I came home from London for the weekend, and I took Dad to the cinema to watch Creed 2. I don't remember the full story, but it didn't go down too well. This is, as you said, 33 years in the making, the rematch. This is a cinema release. I can tell you more about the hype for this. So when they announced Creed 2, we always laugh about the Stallone full captain Instagram posts. He was always doing photos of the script or him writing notes on the script, I remember. And then he started unveiling the cast, and I just saw this image, and it's Drago. It's Drago Jr. And I was like, oh my word, like, they've modernized the Drago family. And we'll get to that properly later. I remember seeing this image of this guy that says, this is going to be quite something, just based on a photo of a man they've cast in this. And I remember that first trailer. You've got the Kendrick Lamar DNA remix, which is one of my favorite trailer songs I've ever heard. A remix, I guess, is polite way of saying. And it just has the ending of the Drago, the shot of him running against the rope and the back, not the wristband. What? Sorry, why have I got the dressing gown? That's the one, the robes, whatever you want to call it. Put it on our social medias this morning. That exact shot. That's how you sell something. You need to show his face. You just need to
the editing and pacing to that trailer. Oh, it was perfection.
And it was incredible. And I remember really enjoying that film. And that is the first time I saw Creed 2 until yesterday. I didn't even have this on collection on Blu-ray. I remember you've seen my constant messages of abuse about Zavi, where we know there's issues happening around the country, but when you order something on November the 25th, like, oh, we're not reviewing it till the 22nd, it's all good. And it arrived on like Thursday, 17th. So that's a bit of panic. Granted, it's actually on Netflix, which is kind of pointless to be panicking about. But I'm a bit of an OCD person. I need it to match the set. So now the set's complete, and I had a really fun time going through this again last night, which is a quick way of putting it. But it's just sad no at the end, I think. But as we said, the main thing we've noticed, you mentioned it, change director. I think we all knew Ryan Coogler wasn't going to come back. He was signed on to Black Panther. Stallone wants these films out. I think off the back of Creed 1, you look at the supporting actor nomination. Ryan Coogler's now doing a massive Marvel film. He's took Michael B. Jordan with him. Creed 2 was kind of, is it going to happen? Is it not? And that's when their social media posts started. And they obviously didn't get Ryan Coogler back for this. The director they had, I actually haven't seen anything he's done beforehand. Stephen Cable Jr. Now, I believe he is now going to be directing the new Transformers film.
Oh, yeah, he is, yeah.
Which means that this is where the vacancies come from for Michael B. Jordan to come in to direct Creed 3. But we had, again, Stallone giving someone a shot that hasn't directed big films before. I'm just trying to look at his IMDb really quickly. He's just done a couple of dramas. And you know what? Again, we praise Stallone for giving Ryan Coogler a shot. Stallone could have done this himself. He could have hired any name in the world, but he gave it to someone else, another minority, because we know with current times they're not getting the chances to direct films. We've seen that a lot. Obviously, you look at Ryan Coogler, we said the perfect example. Stallone turned him down for Creed 1 until he saw Fruitvale Station. And it's the character of Rocky, right? It's the underdog giving someone a shot. You look at how Rocky 1 is, and I quite like the fact that rather than have an A-lister direct Creed films, he's gone for these newer people, because now you've got one guy that's left and gone on to do Black Panther, who's got the whole world at his feet. You've got someone that's going to do Transformers after Bumblebee, which is a much bigger deal than probably it would have been 5 years ago. So it's quite exciting. And again, I've got nothing but respect for Stone for those choices he makes.
Yeah, no, and the change of director, I think it is noticeable. And I mentioned last week with the first Creed film how And I'm guessing this is kind of down to cinematography and direction, I guess, but those long one shots where the camera will follow someone, and there's loads of those throughout the film, and I think they were really effective. Maybe they didn't want to do too much of that with this film and sort of double down and just repeat what they've done before, but I think that's maybe sort of like, there is a style change slightly between the directors, I think, but visually and everything, this completely marries up with the first one to me. And even in some respects, I do think that I know I'm jumping way ahead to the film, and we'll talk about this more in depth towards the end, but the ending boxing match, I think they nailed it way more in this one than any of the previous two. That sort of going, but that more realistic style of sort of Rocky Balboa into Creed into this one. This married the realism of like a HBO pay-per-view and that cinematic quality. I think that's down to the soundtrack as well. So there are elements where I do think this improves on the first Creed film, certainly in the music and that ending boxing match. But I think for me, it's that this doesn't feel quite as emotional. Now, it does get emotional, and it does give a lot of actual depth to like characters that 33 years ago were basically just like a stoic villain, but this one does, completely dives deep into their character, what they've been up to, and sort of their thought process, and gives them both resolution at the end. But I think the biggest one for me, and I don't know, I'm kind of jumping ahead, so we'll circle back to it, but they could leave out completely almost a massive plot point from the first Creed film, which was Rocky's cancer. Now, I'm not saying that they needed it again, but it felt weird going into this one, and I think it's sort of offhanded mention like, oh yeah, he's in remission. And it's just move on, and then it's just like not part of the story. And from how big a plot point that was in the first one, it felt weird going into this one, and that was removed. So I think that's why I give the edge to the first Creed film, because it made me feel more emotional, because it felt like there was almost like a finality to Rocky's life, and we didn't know if we'd pull through or where it was going to go. In this one, it's almost like that didn't even happen, and that was such a big plot point to me in that first Creed film.
Yeah, it's that kind of super soldier thing where you've had this Rocky's got cancer, and it is upsetting, and it's so well done, well directed, well written. There's nothing extraordinary, no over the top montage. I mean, there's a phenomenal montage for it, but it's done in the right way. And this is like, didn't happen. And it's like, yeah, it's like I said, there's a passing comment. Adonis says something somewhere down the line, an argument, but even from like the appearance feels different. It's like, oh, like, Slow in the coach, and don't get me wrong, love him in this, but when you sort of watching them in order, it's kind of, oh, like it's just dropped, and
it's weird.
It's not like it was dropped at the end of the last film. It was dropped between the films. Now we know time has passed, but it is right. It didn't have that finality. It didn't feel like there was any vulnerabilities. Now he does get a really great character arc, which we'll obviously get into later on. Certainly the final scene of his. And obviously there's questions left as to what's going to happen in the future of these films, because I think at this point in time we still don't think we can retire the character of Rocky, which I guess we'll get to. But in regards to that direct change, you are right. I don't think the drama hits as well, but I do think that the boxing feels more cinematic. It's probably a better term for it. I loved those tracking shots in the first one. I loved how they did it. But that second, the fights in this felt more probably accompanied to having a Drago on screen. I don't think having a one shot with a Drago would work. I think you need it the way it was done. I know that's jumping at the editing, the pacing, everything about it was perfect. And we mentioned how bad Goodison Park looked on the CGI in that first one. The arena fights, you weren't sat there thinking, oh my God, that background's horrible. You just were in it like it felt like you were there with them.
Yeah, and I think how it covers it as well. I know I'm jumping to the boxing, but it's all in mid shot, and it's just keeping focus on that character and their stance in that moment, I guess. And another thing as well with this film, the writing is so strong. Like, you could think that, oh, this was popular, let's rush out another one. But, they had us with the first one. There may have been some skepticism when it was like, oh, we're going to do a spin-off of Rocky about Apollo Creed's son. And we were like, oh, this could go either way. It was fantastic. But then there's always that pressure on with the sequel. Is it going to be as good as the first? Even if it doesn't quite match the quality of the first one, is it still a good film? And I was going into it with that, because if this had been terrible, not only would it have been like a horrible send up to Creed and the legacy of the Rocky films, but also it kind of serves as a sequel really to Rocky 4 as well in some way. And then our thoughts on Rocky 4. If you don't know our thoughts on Rocky 4, go back and watch our Rocky 4 review. But that is, for better or worse, that is a film that's very near and dear to our hearts, and we do have a lot of fun with it. So you would be you're kind of crushing the legacy of the Rocky franchise, specifically Rocky 4 and Creed as well. So I think a lot was riding on this film, but the writing's so strong. And again, my biggest praise for the first Creed film, I always say that to me is the best soft reboot franchise I've ever seen. It's the perfect way of doing it. I have seen Tron Legacy now, by the way, so I can add that to the list of another solid soft reboot. It's keeping Adonis as the front and center in this franchise. Now, Rocky does have a big part of it. Of course, he's bound to filter into this story, and I think that's why I can't see the Creed franchise going on beyond 3. We'll get into this at the end, but I'm even struggling to think of where they could go with a potential third one after this one. But I think that you need that synergistic relationship between Adonis and Rocky. And although Adonis is a great character, I think he's great because he is fundamentally tied in with that past of Rocky and Apollo and the history that went down in that fight. I don't know if he'd sort of have the charisma to carry a franchise past that point. But he is front and center at this thing all the way through. And if anything, this is probably more personal than the first film in terms of his characterization, because this is going back to that fateful moment where his father was killed in the ring. So definitely feels like the stakes are a lot higher in this one.
Yeah, and I think it's what you said. It's the expectation. This isn't just following up on Creed, having Rocky involved. This is following Rocky 4, arguably the most well-known of the Rocky films is probably the best term for it. If it's not people's favorite, it's the one that everyone can probably tell you the one they know about. And I think that is important. And you mentioned sort of that, teasing that rematch stuff. This is it's the rematch. 33 is in the making. It's not actually a rematch. It's a bloodline thing. And I think the moment you have the opening scene where we have, I keep saying, I always think Khal Drogo. Obviously, that's a different franchise. When we've got old Ivan Drago waking up, waking his son, getting prepared for training, it feels like a revenge thriller where you know that there's some overarching plan. I think that's down to Ludwig Göransson's score in the opening scene. Rather than have them in like Russia, they've got them in Ukraine. They've got them chucked away from that Russian, obviously, which they get into later on. But everything's so set up in that first scene. You go, okay, this is the real deal. This isn't going to be some over-the-top caricature. I've returned with my son. This is like there's a plan in action, and he's had a horrible, horrible 30 years. And I think the opening scene sets the tone for where the film's going. As you said, you still get Adonis as the main character. I think his performance is great in this. I think it's probably on par with the first one. I don't think... this sounds horrible. Adonis said there's not too much to it. One of my minor issues with this is kind of what I laugh about with Creed, with Rocky 2. So you know how we did the Rocky 2? I was like, wow, he proposed and got married and had a kid in like the space of like 25 minutes, whatever, on screen. I was like, it felt like Stone was chucking everything into that film, thinking he wouldn't get another shot to do Rocky 3. I kind of had similar vibes. I was like, oh, we're getting the championship fight at the start of the film. We're getting the engagement at the start of the film, and she wasn't pregnant at the start of the film. Got no issue with that, but it feels very, again, here's these really big character moments, and they're just throwing them in one by one. And obviously, ultimately, you're also doing Rocky 4. So you need to also include that into the mix. And I actually think you mentioned the writing. I think Stone was very smart with this because they're not just building up the fact that his father died at the hands of Drago. But the fact that it's not that we don't want you to fight him. It's you've got everything to lose. And that's such a key term for me in this is that, he is now engaged. He's expecting a child, has a child in this, and he's the champion. He has everything to lose, whereas Drago's got nothing. It always reminds of Dark Knight Rises. He's like,
I was going to go there too. Damn it, you're beating me to it.
the child born in hell, essentially, and I loved that. And I think Stone was very smart with the writing for that because I kind of say it's a bad thing they chucked that in. They weaved it into the plot for it to actually have a payoff, and that you feel the gravitas of certain moments in the film because you're not going to have a history. Even as far as the boxing, it doesn't end with him losing the fight. He wins via disqualification, but everyone knows he's lost. And it's the minor changes like that that just go ahead and make that difference from it being a combination of Rocky 2, 3, and 4 condensed into 2 hours. It felt like Stallone had ideas on paper and he's written them and it's worked. They've been directed well. They've been acted well. And I think he's pulled something off which is quite ambitious, to say the least, with his grand scheme of Creed 2.
Yeah, and sometimes that throwing everything at the wall and seeing what sticks isn't bad for a film. It can be bad if it's convoluted and it doesn't feel focused. And I can see what you're saying. It's definitely following that similar mold and similar pace. We even say like Creed 1 on paper really is almost the same exact film as Rocky 1. In turn, this is the same as Rocky 2 for the reasons you just mentioned, with the marriage and the child being born and everything. And kind of a rematch as well in some way. I know it's a first time boxing match, but it's also kind of a rematch.
It's like Rocky 2, 3, and 4 like combined into this like one ball, and it works.
And with any like lesser writer, that would just be an absolute clusterfuck, right? And it'd just be an unfocused mess, and it wouldn't function as a film. And also I think pregnancy in a film can show that passage of time quite effectively. There is bound to be time in between, like recovery between boxing matches and everything like that. And I think it helps. It adds to the drama as well, because if you don't have that, it's like, well, I think the family moments and the more tender moments would just be almost treading water. So it just adds more drama into the mix. And as you said, it perfectly encapsulates everything that he can lose. And I think Rocky could probably connect with that as well as a character. So I do like Adonis's journey in this film. I guess we can talk about like the montage as well. One of the best montage scenes. I didn't think they'd be able to top the Creed one, and maybe some people would argue that they didn't, because I do specifically love that moment, as I mentioned in last week's review, and the quad bikes where they point up and Rocky's there. But this is just awesome, and the music again. It's when they combine the rap into it as well. It's just, if you're hitting the gym, if you're going for a sprint, get the soundtrack going, especially when it hits that, and when that rap kicks in. You're away. So I love everything they do with Adonis in this, and also kind of Bianca and Amara as well, because I don't think we really talked much about Bianca. So as a character, she's fine, but what I like is that there is potential. When I say that I don't think Adonis could carry a franchise past a third film on his own, there are elements where I'm thinking, if this did connect with audiences, and I don't think it would on the same level as Rocky, because Rocky has had decades, since, when was it? The 70s, the first one came out. And obviously Creed hasn't had that impact yet, and it is still kind of very much tied to Rocky specifically. But with her sort of degenerative hearing loss that she's got, I could imagine that getting to a point in like 10, 20 years, if they do keep cranking these out, that being incredibly emotional as they grow old together, and she's going through this and he has to work with it. And we see the seeds of that specifically with Amara in this as well, and I love that scene, how that's handled too. No dialogue, and it's all done through the expression. And I think that, he just absolutely nails that in that scene. Michael B. Jordan, it's just all from a look, and you know exactly what's happened. So no, I quite like that family bonding stuff. And we get more of that in this than we do in Rocky 2, because Rocky 2, Adrian just has the complications, right? And he says, we'll see the child together. And you get a little bit of a moment, but then it's just like, I want you to win. And then boom, we're straight into the boxing. Whereas this, we get more of that family life. And I quite like that.
Yeah, the bits I loved are these really minor details, even to the point of him wanting to go back to the gym. And he won't do it. And they even bring that real life policy, like, if you don't defend your title, they're going to strip them from you. You'll lose it. To come back, he just gets in the car and drives home because he can't do it. I love that he's internally struggling to go back into that ring. And there's that quote from Stone early on in the film where he says, that guy broke things into me which haven't ever been repaired. That was powerful, and you get the sense of that from Adonis, especially when he has that added responsibility of being a parent, of wanting to settle down and marry someone as well. I think it added to it. And as you mentioned, the fact that he spent time with Bianca, because Tessa Thompson is so likable in so many of the films. But in Creed, she feels so much more of a character than Tessa Thompson. I don't know if that feels rude or not, but I love even the small bits of when we get to see her, that she's got her own story. That, why would she benefit from going to LA? Well, she's done what she can fully music-wise. If she goes into LA, she can get a record deal. She can get signed up. We can see her at these new clubs. I like that they're also projecting her character, because she's also got stuff to do. Obviously, we've mentioned the hearing stuff. She's got a daughter. And it's that dynamic with Adonis's, obviously, stepmom, that she lost her husband and he lost his dad by getting in that ring. Mm-hmm. And he now has a child, and he now has that partner to do the exact same thing. And it didn't feel like they were sort of tapping you on the head saying, do it. It felt so much more natural that would be a part of the conversations. And I really liked her act, because ultimately she goes to the ring with him still, even if she doesn't want to. And then right at the end of the film, she's the one doing his entrance music. She's singing for him as he comes out. And I think their relationship, the chemistry, it feels so natural. It feels like it's progressed. You can see how times change their relationship in a really good way. And it's what the core of the Rocky films are. The core of the Rocky films, yes, it's boxing, but it's the story of Rocky and Adrian. And I think Creed has reached that territory with Bianca and Adonis, where you need them hand in hand with one another. And I think you can't really have one working without the other.
And she's very different to Adrian as well. Like it could have very easily been like a carbon copy. She is supportive, of course she is, but she has her own dreams and everything like that, and a career that she wants to pursue. So I don't know, with Adrian, like fair play, it felt like she was just doing what she could to maintain the family. Where you have Bianca, she is more independent. She does want to achieve things for herself as well. She's still supportive of Adonis and what he wants to do and is there for him, but it feels like a different dynamic from what Rocky and Adrian was. Not necessarily in a bad way. I do still think, because again, with all the decades that we've had with those films, and we've seen more films with them, and we've seen their relationship progress past more than just 2 films at the moment. That both feel strong in their bond in some way, but they are fundamentally different, and it would have been very easy just to do like a carbon copy of that relationship. But if anything, like to me, I think the biggest theme of this film is family, because you have all these different sort of like family pockets. You have Adonis building his family and starting a brand new family with Bianca and Amara. You have the 2 that we're going to talk about in a moment with the Dragos and that father-son relationship. It's a very close relationship, and it gets stronger, especially when we get to that moment, which I know we're going to talk about at the end of the boxing match. But then you also have Rocky with a broken family and trying to repair that and regain that. So I definitely think the theme of this film is family, and I think that's a really good it's a really good theme to have, and I think it all works and they all connect in a certain way, and obviously come together at the end where all of them are repaired in some way. So I kind of like that fact where if this was the last Rocky/Creed film, it would work, and it has that resolution to it, and it feel the final moment as well. I know we're going to talk about that when we get onto Rocky. Beautiful. You could leave it here. I do think they should do a Creed 3, and we know they are doing a Creed 3, so maybe they'll bookend it after that, but I think we need to talk about the Dragos, don't we? Because this is where so much of this film hangs on.
Where Apollo Creed is mentioned, he's mentioned because of Ivan Drago. It's like yin and yang. You can't really have one without the other now. People don't flock to watch Rocky and Rocky 2 for Creed versus Rocky. They watch the films for Rocky and Adrian. When you think of Rocky 4, maybe it's me. You're not watching it for Drago versus Rocky. You're watching it for Drago versus Apollo Creed. Everything from the build-up is that history has pushed this to something else. And as I mentioned earlier, that opening scene, it's like, how are we going to set these guys up? What has happened in the 30-year gap? And it's just that slapping him on the sofa, living in a shithole, working in construction. In his spare time, he's doing like underground boxing. They're all booing him still. So that family legacy is very well known there. And you've kind of got basically the B-Tech Giancarlo Esposito as the villain for this, the promoter that wants to basically have the fight of the century. But again, it's done in such a way that, this would be far more personal too, because you've got certainly the bigger connection to Rocky 4, but bringing Drago back, knowing he's not had a good life, is kind of, I don't want to say sad, I want to say it feels appropriate for where the character is. And then the whole purpose of this film is that you begin to feel sorry for him, and then he's trying to live his life through his son to regain his wife, and it's the ultimate father-son relationship, like complicated, to say the least, with a beautiful payoff getting to the final few moments. But my words, as I said, that Instagram photo of that guy, you can't have Drago's son and him not be a brute. I'm glad he didn't look like Dolph Lundgren. That would have been too much if you had a carbon copy.
I was going to say, it's weird. He doesn't bear much resemblance to the father, or indeed the mother, really, does he? He is completely different.
He's a Victor Crumb. I texted this to you yesterday. Yeah. He literally looked... If anyone's seen what Victor Crumb looks like today, he is shredded. He's like bold. He's got the bit of a beard. I'm like, Victor Crumb is in the Creed films. He's going to have his own music. And I think when you have to bring in that family, it's as big as Creed. You're not just playing with characters. You're playing with the legacy of someone that's famous for what they did in that film, for killing Apollo Creed. And it was, I don't want to say it was easy to write them in, but Stallone focused on, certainly with Ivan Drago, on character, not physicality. And character is the one thing he didn't have in Rocky 4, which makes the journey incredible looking back at Rocky 4 and looking at this one, because he's had a character arc develop throughout this and in that. And I don't know if I'm sort of blabbering on too much, but I think the return of those were handled so well. The build-up, the press conferences, even the little like minor announcement of going at the Philadelphia steps. I don't think there's one bad moment with either of these two.
Yeah, and it's nice to actually get some lines from Ivan
Yeah.
Drago in this film too, and a character. We talked about that persona that he has in Rocky 4, that sort of like big lumbering giant of a man who barely says it. He's like the Russian super robot, isn't he? He's the super boxer, and that works for that film and the tone of that film. But it is, I'm just so glad that they actually gave, because he is a really good actor. I think Ivan Drago, Dolph Lundgren's an amazing actor. Like, he can definitely do some of the dramatic stuff in this film really well, and it goes there. But yeah, Florian Montano, I think his name is. Absolute unit. He's a Romanian amateur boxer. I remember around the time, because these films always kind of spur you on for like a week to get back in the gym, and then you kind of drop off it a little bit. But I was watching this guy's workouts, machine, like the stuff, and you see it in this film as well. Like, there's that bit where he's almost in like press up position, and he's got the ropes, and he like jumps, and then like everything that, it's amazing. Like the physicality that all the actors got into for this film was incredible. But yeah, it is a logical progression of the Dragos, and I like that because we see just how far Ivan Drago's fallen out of the popularity. I mean, he was like Russia's child in 1980. Was it 1984? It was 1985. And just after that boxing match, after he lost that, his country just turned their back on him. He was their prized possession. He was the thing that was going to change the eye of like Russia and bring it to the forefront, and then that didn't work, so he's just discarded. And yeah, we see him. I must admit, it doesn't look like they're making much money, but for the amount of food that his son must be eating to fuel his workouts, like, I think all the money must just be going on to that. But it is a really cool character art, because you do feel sorry for them. You see the conditions they're living in, and you kind of, in a weird way, you want to see, although Drago did kill Apollo Creed, you do kind of want to see him get redemption for that. And it's been, Rocky's lived humble life. He has come back to Philadelphia, but he's running his restaurant. He's doing fine. And then you've got Adonis, who's now risen above. And to be fair, Adonis has always lived, not so much when he was younger, because he was in sort of like juvenile detention halls, but he did get a good job. He was on an amazing salary, had a fantastic house. His boxing career's progressed, and he's living in even nicer establishments. But for 33 years, they've just been lived in absolute squalor, and they want the taste. They want to be invited back to that high table. And speaking of the high table, I guess one of my favorite moments in the movie, I did not know that Bridget Nielsen as Ludmila Drago would come back for this film, because obviously she had that, was it like a 1 year, 2 year relationship with Stallone? And I was like, is it still a bit, is it still a bit cagey? There was no rumors or anything. And she's not in it much. She's only in a couple of scenes, but when she approached the table, I was like, I just like lost my mind. And it's not fan service for fan service sake, because that's kind of the goal. That's the target. That is the mother of Drago's child. And like those moments at the end in the ring where she just gets up and leaves and doesn't want to be seen dead there, and he looks over and sees that empty seat. That's the stuff that gets to me at the end of this film.
It's so well done, because it's that the high table scene's probably one of the best scenes in the film for character purposes, right? It's got nothing to do with Adonis. He's looking like a god. The key point is that he's in Russia for this. He's in Ukraine. He's been brought back into Russia. Now, we know the USSR isn't a thing anymore, but that very much that we'll welcome you back with wide arms, come to our stuff, that's very real. That's the kind of oligarch thing you'd expect. And the fact she's obviously now married with some higher-ranking hierarchy guy, not Putin, but it must be a head of some kind of family somewhere, and her extended reveal, and you really empathize with Drago Jr. because that's a kid that someone walked out on him. We don't know how old he was. He was a couple of months old. That kind of, you don't really get the affection of it till then, and you know that he is struggling with that. And when she walks in the room, Ivan Drago's like got his like head down, like he's really nervous. I was like, this isn't what I expected from this, and I think she's ultimately changed that, because jumping to the end, as I said, when she gets up and leaves, Ivan turns around, and you can tell he's upset, but it's Drago Jr. in the ring when he sees it. And then obviously at this point in time, he's getting battered, which we'll, I guess, discuss a lot later. But you begin to empathize with both of them on the spot. You feel sorry for both of them. You just realize that the whole purpose of them is that they've had nothing, and they just want to basically I don't even want to say reclaim their identity. They just want probably respect, maybe. I don't really know. It's that Ivan's living his life through his son, and he doesn't really figure out the gravitas of that until right in the last few moments when he realizes that his son's the one at risk, and that entire arena is turned on his son, and he's just going to get it done and get out because he never had that father figure. He had a wife that was pushy, and now he needs to be the father to his son. I think that's such a fascinating arc because it just gives so much more character to him. It would have been so easy if he was stoic and didn't speak and just battered his son, because you imply that he's probably been a pretty tough dad to his son over the years. He's like, you know, that scene in the restaurant, probably one of my favorite scenes. There's like so many pictures, like, but nothing of me. That is a big moment because when I was watching Rocky Balboa and Creed, I actually did look around both. There was never anything from Rocky 4. You can't see many photos. I was like, that is a big line because it makes you think. And it backs to Rocky's like, no, I don't want anything to do with you, essentially. And it's really sad. And then you just get to that scene where his son turns up at the door. And I think me and you spoke about this off air before. And we're both like, oh my God, like, are they just going to beat the shit into Rocky? Like, because they're planning something. They're flying to America. There's a plan of action. I was like, are they going to like leave Rocky for dead? Is he going to be like the Godfather or something? And no, I'm glad they didn't do that because I think that would have been really not insulting.
But I don't think you would have had any kind of redemption for that point after Drago. Yeah. If Drago had have done that to Rocky, I don't think we would have cared.
It would have just been
character.
Cartoon villain. How evil can you get? This evil. Okay, done. Yeah. Whereas by not doing that, the son just enters, sort of, you know, look how big I am.
Flexes.
And then they go, yeah. And it is that stuff. It's the build-up of their reveal. Like, something big is going down. And then you get that press conference out of nowhere, and it's so well built up. And again, it comes down to think how Stone's chosen to write both of them. The fact that his son just wants his dad to be happy. His son doesn't actually care about his mom. His son doesn't care about any of that. He sees straight through it as well. Going back to the high table scene, and that you can tell he just wants his dad. He doesn't really care for much else. And I think that's his way. Of course, also. The Return of the Dragos is phenomenal. I didn't think it'd be as good as it was, to be fair. I thought there'd be something cheesy, something over the top. I don't think we had either of them. It felt very real. It felt very grounded, to the point that he got DQ'd because he punched him while he was still down. And what a savage punch as well. That was. You could feel that.
I'm getting emotional just talking about it. Like, this is really where the heart and soul of this film is with these two. But yeah, no, that restaurant scene, definitely. You mentioned there's no like pictures from Rocky 4. It'd be brilliant if there were loads of pictures from Rocky 4, but none of that fight or any of Ivan Drago. Like, if there's just like a family Polaroid of like their arm around the robot at Paulie's birthday or something, but nothing of Drago. He's like, you got a picture of the robot, but none of me. Yeah, it's like when it's like, my son knows only this, and I'm like, yes, this is awesome. But going back to what you said there about you're glad that we didn't see them, you know, kick the shit into Rocky. Do you remember the behind the scenes that got leaked where Ivan Drago and Rocky get into a bust up in the hospital lobby? I think it's probably after the scene when Rocky visits Adonis after the first fight. And then I think it must have been after that he leaves, and then it's never been released as like an official deleted scene. It's only been shown as like behind the scenes. You can see the cameras in shot and everything just on set for it, but they are just like beating the shit into each other and like throwing each other into like the desk in the hospital. I'd love to see that scene if it was clearly filmed. I'd love to see that in a deleted scene somewhere just to say that I've seen it and they've kind of had a rematch, but I'm glad that it wasn't used in the final cut because I think that it would have shifted the focus again. It would have made it more of a Rocky film rather than Adonis. So I'm glad that they keep the focus where it needs to be. And also I think it would have just been a bit too cartoony to see them just slugging it out in the middle of a hospital. So I'm glad they didn't do that. But yeah, and then just like the final boxing match, as you mentioned, I think it's that he is living his life through his son, but it's also his son's going down the same route that he was, that he is basically just being used as a device, as a machine, as a face for something else, as a product essentially, rather than actually being his son. So yeah, it's incredible what they did with those. And I guess we should move on to Rocky as well, because the emotion doesn't just stop there. It goes on to Rocky as well. So as I said, weird they don't continue the cancer stuff, and maybe that is something they could bring back in a third one potentially if they did want to go in that direction. But you know, at this point, Rocky, he's lost Adrian as of Rocky Balboa. He's lost Paulie as of the first Creed film. It's like, what do you do with Rocky at this point? And we learned that his son Robert has moved away. He started his own family. and he doesn't really have much contact with him now. So really, it's probably just Rocky and Adonis. And even at this point as well, Rocky becomes aware that Adonis is probably going to want to start his own life. He's got a family now. He doesn't want to sort of be like hanging around like a shadow over them or anything like that. But it's Rocky trying to rebuild that connection with his son, and you don't quite know what happened with it. And I kind of like that, because they seemed pretty close in Balboa, and then I guess it's just people just break away, people move away, you know, they have their life, and maybe he doesn't check in as much as possible. But it does lead to a really nice resolution at the end, and I'm glad they got Milo Ventimiglia back as well to play his son. I think I was reading earlier that Stallone sort of pitched that he'd like to reach out and get him back, and Milo was like, if they want me back, I'd love to come back. If they don't want me back, there's no pressure. But it felt good. It's that nice continuity as well that I mentioned, where Balboa into Creed 2, they feel almost, I know there's going to be a Creed 3, so that's going to be its own trilogy, but it does feel part of the whole of that new style they went for, starting with Balboa.
I loved what they did with that, because as someone that, I said on the Balboa review that I'd seen Balboa, I didn't remember it. I didn't know it was his son for like, as in I knew at the time, but heading into Creed, I'd forgot he had a son. I knew about the real life stuff with stage shows. I was like, oh, okay, they're not going to mention the son because of that. And that's why I think I struggled with this scene in a way, like emotionally, that it's so well built up that he's never picked up the phone, he's never seen his grandkid, and he just knocks at the door at the end. And I can't remember, I think the music kicks in ever so slightly as well. And then like he hugs his son and he starts crying, and it's really powerful. And I think the Sage Stallone has got a lot to do with that as well, because we kind of spoke last week about, we think this was a really hard film for Stallone to make in Creed 1, whereas that final scene of Creed 2, we always say that Rocky's autobiographical. It's a reflection of Stallone's life, that he doesn't have his son anymore, and I think that's what made that scene devastating to watch, because you can see in his eyes that was really hard for him to perform as well. And it's such a well-known scene, especially when it's integrated with the Creed scene happening as well, where he's obviously got his daughter visiting the grave of Apollo. I just thought, as far as Rocky goes as a character, leaving Philadelphia, going to see his son, giving his the grandkid the ball. Now, when he said looks like Adrian, that happened as well. I don't know if it was the hair or the eyes, but that looked like Adrian. And that was very weird, because it looked like too much like Adrian. But it was a really nice moment to have him back. It's that continuity, that the fact he was happy to come back for like a minute. Some actors would turn the nose up, like, you only want me back for a 30-second scene? No, thank you. I like the fact that he was willing to do it. I like the fact that someone wanted him back on, and I thought it was a really touching moment. If they'd never made a Creed 3, they had the perfect ending for all the character acts in these films. But obviously, we're never going to get it, so I'm intrigued to see what they intend to do with Rocky. But as I said, he didn't have as much to do, and this is the first one. And by dropping that cancer subplot, not saying he didn't have as much to do, there needed to be something there. But the stuff with the son, I thought, was very powerful. And I think it probably left a better ending than he could have had for anything else.
Yeah, the cancer stuff, like, although I say that it is weird how it is just kind of offhandedly dropped, but I can't see a place for that storyline in this film. I think that would have been too much then. You talk about the film. The film is packed. It is doing a lot of stuff. But I feel that would have gone against the theme of the story they wanted to tell with this one. And I think it would have just been too much to pack in. And it's like, where is my emotion meant to be right now? Is it meant to be with Adonis and his family? Is it meant to be with the redemption of the Dragos? Is it meant to be with Rocky rebuilding his family? And now I've got to feel bad that Rocky could die. And I think it would have just confused everything. I think it would have been too much for this one film. But it is still a fitting ending. And I remember that after this film came out, Stallone says that he was retiring the character. And I was like, no, I need that. I keep saying I do think that we need to see Rocky die just for personal closure. It's going to be horrible. And if that day ever does happen in the film, it's going to just completely break me forever. But I feel like, I think you mentioned it, it's just, if he stays alive, it's, oh, there's one more Rocky left in me, or there's another Creed film going to come out. But if they do that, it's done. There's no coming back from that, unless he comes back as like a weird force projection ghost vision, like Mickey in Creed 5, maybe, if they get that far. But no, it's the perfect ending. And even like Milo as an actor, like I mentioned that I originally saw him in Hero Season 1 as Peter Petrelli. Soon after that, Rocky Balboa came out, although I didn't see the film at that point. And then honestly, like the guy's probably done like a bunch of stuff, but I don't remember seeing him in anything since Rocky Balboa. So seeing him come back in this, which would have been like 12 years after, It was really nice just for that personal closure. And yeah, you're right. Like Stallone's acting in that moment. It's that sigh. I think he says like, "How old are you?" And I can't remember how old Logan says he is, and he just goes like, I think like the weight of all those years and what he's missed just hits him. It's beautiful played. You got the bouncy ball as well coming back from the first one. I love that stuff. It's just it just works into it so well. We've talked about the boxing already, so and kind of all the emotion that falls out from that. So should we just jump straight to the music, because Ludwig Göransson just returns with a powerhouse soundtrack to this one, continuing the established themes. There's probably even more established themes from the previous Rockies in this one, especially when we get to that boxing match at the end. But it's also advancing those brand new themes, which I love. Adonis has his own theme that's instantly recognizable. It sounds like it fits very nicely into the established Rocky sound, but it also is its own theme as well. I did see actually that Vince DiCola really wanted to come back and compose this one, the guy who did the score for Rocky 4. And he was quoted as saying in his Facebook post, "I would have loved to return. However, that's just how Hollywood works. We don't always get what we want." As much as I love Vince DiCola, his music's incredible. You know, the synth and everything, whether it's the Transformers, the movie, or Rocky 4, that sound wouldn't have fit with this. And not to say that he would have done an exactly the same kind of sounding score, because that was very much 80s. That was very much of the time. And the guy's done loads of other soundtracks as well, as I'm sure, and could have changed the sound to it. You needed that continuity for me in terms of the music. How you had Bill Conti for so many films. He didn't do Rocky 4, I know, but you need that continuity there with the music, in my opinion, with the composers.
Yeah, I mean, you know how much I spoke highly of this guy over the last few months. You know, we had the Tenet soundtrack, we've had Mandalorian episodes coming weekly, and we have the Creed films. The only thing we're missing is a Black Panther discussion. But Ludwig Göransson is, to me, he's one of the best working composers right now. He doesn't sound like any other composer. He's got his own style. He's applied that to Star Wars. He's applied it to the Rocky films. He's applied it to Marvel. His stuff doesn't sound like everything else that's coming around the time. And I think certainly in Creed 2, it feels a lot stronger, the score, than in the first Creed film. I think there's some, obviously, there's some song choice of real life rappers in this, and he works with them. But in terms of key scenes, even that sort of Dust Bowl bit, or when we get the Dragos at the start, there's like this like overarching, not necessarily a menacing theme, but there's some music there, like it's that song like let's empathize tone. There's no build up. It's this is where they are and where they're placed, and we've got this sort of bleak, depressing score to set up to show you how the Dragons have. Then you're getting down the line to the entrance music, and it's just, you know,
I was just trying to find what the track was called on YouTube, but if you guys know what we're talking about, that's I've got to say, he comes out first. His entrance beats Adonis's, in my opinion, just out of the two.
Yeah, there's 4 entrances in these films today. I loved Adonis's first one, not his second one, when you've got the weird little light show, the triangles. I love that stuff because it's so over the top. Not in Rocky terms over the top. That's what it's like in real life now. It's all about the entrances, who can come out to the best thing. And I thought when you get to the second fight, that the Drago entrance is like, shit is about to go down. It's going to happen. And you get the build up of that with both of their entrances. But
do you think Ivan was like weirded out? Like, I remember when I was coming up an elevator to James Brown and Apollo Creed coming down on a giant mechanical bullhead.
One of my worries was that could Adonis go over the top and try and do something his dad did. I'm glad he definitely didn't. I don't think he had the charisma for it. I don't think it would have worked for his character. But it was that like him at home being the champion, getting as a grand end, not the champion, but they knew he was going to be the champion if he hadn't got DQs. He just had to wait 10 more seconds. But yeah, it was the score's phenomenal, and that boxing, the final fight. I think we hit before we went live. When the main Rocky theme plays, nothing but goosebumps. Then you're getting the other Rocky songs.
And continues, it continues this time, whereas Creed 1 didn't.
It's not this beat and drop. It's let's just end this right now, and absolutely phenomenal. And it's what you mentioned. I know that the other composer wanted to come back, but Ludwig has made Creed his own. It would be weird if a Rocky composer came on for the Creed films, because the whole point of them is to be different, not to be so similar to the past. And I think even, let's drop a Mando spoiler, Luke Skywalker came back last week. He didn't even do the Luke theme for 5 minutes. He did his own stuff for the fighting scenes. Then he brought it in at the perfect time to bring it in. And it had its moments. but the core of it was something else. And I felt like we've had that with the Creed, that he's not dropped the Rocky theme in for completely for 2 films. He not does it every time Adonis throws a punch. He's saved it for the pristine moment to do it. And you couldn't have picked a better timing of both films for him to have done that.
Yeah, no, it's incredibly placed. I remember when that hit, when I was watching it that opening night, and I was just losing my mind because that I think that was probably one of the other biggest Rocky themes that didn't come back for Creed. I think most of the other ones did. You got that little bit of a fanfare, and it got you jazzed when you were watching it. You were like, yes, and then it goes back into the normal music, and there wasn't anything wrong with that, but it did feel like you wanted that to continue and you wanted it to like carry on with like Gonna Fly Now or whatever. But yeah, no, I love the soundtrack, and as you mentioned, like the rap stuff as well. That montage song, Running, I can't remember who the composers are, but brilliant. I guess we could talk about favorite moments, and honestly, I feel like I've kind of talked about a lot of them already. I mentioned Bridget Nielsen. By the way, Bridget Nielsen, she did a talk. She was 8 months pregnant during the filming of this. You wouldn't be able to tell because I mean that's pretty close to popping at that point, but they mask it well. Like Jesus, I wasn't aware of that. Favorite scenes, definitely seeing her come back was a big surprise. I love the whole sort of like ending resolution as we talked about with the Dragos. The montage, the only other one I can think of, it's sort of like an offhanded line, but it's a reference back to Rocky 2, and it's when Adonis is freaking out about proposing to Bianca. And he asked Rocky, he says, like, well, what did you say to Adrian when you proposed to her? And he was like, I asked her if she wouldn't mind marrying me much. And it's like, yes, Rocky 2. Because I'm a sucker for references, clearly. But they're the ones that mainly stick out to me. Honestly, the whole film's great, but those are sort of like the big ones for me, at least.
Yeah, I'm going to follow you. I think certainly, well, I guess the last scene for each, the Drago's final scene of when he's throwing the towel and the son won't look at him, he's like pushing him, and I forgot what he says, but he kind of says, you know, well, it's just sad, isn't it? It was just very emotional. That's one of my favorite scenes. That's the redemption to me of Ivan Drago, is throwing that towel over the rope. I'm glad there wasn't a high five, like, you deserve it, man. Glad they didn't do that. That's too easy. Again, Rocky's final scene, Adonis's final scene. The proposal scene I had a lot of fun with because it's the fact she's not wearing the hearing aid. It was very funny, very different, and it kind of suited that kind of Rocky thing. Like, this just didn't go according to plan.
Yeah, I love it. I love how he plays that as well, because we haven't seen that more comedic side to him. It's like when he's getting ready to say it and then he sees her coming out and he just kind of like lounges on the bed casually, like nothing to see here. Like, yeah, no, it was a really good physical performance, I thought, that part with the proposal.
I've got 2 Adonis scenes. I would say it's a great scene, but I've never seen a training montage underwater before. Now, where this is new to me, boxers too, that was incredible. Yeah. And tying in with that, I think the Adonis scene with his daughter at the gym, when he gets out that howl, which is terrifying, and then he starts punching. It's like, right, okay, he's going to get back into. And I love that's one of my favorite scenes. A very underrated scene, but it's most of the film. Every scene of the Dragos don't have one bad moment in this. I think I don't really have any criticism. I mentioned that the pacing, they might have been trying to throw too much in, but that's really a backhanded compliment because everything worked. Nothing didn't work. And I would say this is far better on the second viewing than I remember being on the first, and I really enjoyed it on my first viewing. But as an overall, I can't really fault this. I don't have specific issues as such. Even the little reference to Creed 1 of him winning his car back, that was pretty neat. He doesn't care he's the world champion. He's like, just give me my keys. Then you find out it's the car that Apollo Creed left him, the only thing he was ever left. Not to moan, stupid to have gambled it away. But I love that. That was another one of those great little moments. There's little character things, isn't it? He cares about his dad's legacy more than his own, in that sense of my dad's car. But final scenes is pretty much all of it. And that kind of echoes my final thoughts that it's a solid Creed film. It is helping both Creed's legacy and the Rocky legacy and the Drago legacy, I guess we can now add to the equation. And I thought it was solid. And again, it's something on paper that shouldn't have worked that ended up working beyond belief. And nothing but respect to Stallone and the director for doing that and the performances around. So another solid entry into the Rocky Saga. I don't know what we're calling it, the Rocky Saga, the Rocky Legacy films. There's no official like MCU type thing or Star Wars Saga type thing. I keep searching it, but I'm just going to call it the Rocky Saga from now on.
It's a saga. It's a saga. I think a saga is usually a term that's like a franchise or a story that spans many different generations. And I mean, this absolutely does. This goes back to it is the 70s, wasn't it? It was 70.
Yeah.
76, wasn't it? I think the first one. So yeah, it's definitely a saga. And yeah, my final thoughts is the more that we've talked about this today, I feel like I've had more to unpack with this one than Creed 1, but I prefer Creed 1 just by a margin. And I think this definitely has the stronger villain element, and I like that they are kind of like the antagonist roles because of what happened in Rocky 4, but they do give them good redemption by the end of it. So no one's really a villain. It's all just different perspectives kind of thing. And I like villains or protagonists like that as well. The music's better than the first one, I think, in terms of just like the soundtrack overall. I like what they do with Adonis's character with the family thing. So like plot point by plot point, I love everything in this film more, but I think what it comes down to, I honestly think it's just the direction and the cinematography, and I think mostly it's down to Rocky's character. And I know this isn't a Rocky led franchise, he's very much a supporting character, but that stuff is crucial to me. And not to say his stuff in this is bad and it fits in with the theme of the story as I mentioned, but that stuff with the cancer stuff in the first one just really hit me hard. And I think it was maybe because that was the first one out of the gate, and it was like, oh wow, this soft reboot, knows what it's doing, and it's kind of like the first Rocky film again, but it does have its own identity, and that's basically the theme of that first one, is forging your own identity out of something or coming to terms with it. So I don't know. We'll get into our rankings in a minute, but even right now, I'm flip-flopping whether I'm going to switch this with the other one. I think this is definitely out of the two the most entertaining one to watch. It's that weird way that we kind of split the Rocky franchise, right? There's the ones that we find legitimately better, but the ones that we enjoy watching the most, and that's kind of this one. I would stick this one in rather than Creed 1, but I think Creed 1's more of a solid film. But this is incredible, and I just really hope they don't mess it up with Creed 3. And I guess before we get into our rankings, we will get onto that in a second, but we need to talk about like the future of this franchise. Like, where can this go? We've had 2 years now, and we've heard rumors and rumblings. There's been rumors of Stallone wanting to do another Rocky film, not a Creed film, another Rocky film following Balboa, following these two films, where he finds, I think he travels down to Mexico and he finds an up-and-coming boxer there. He takes him under his wing and trains him up. And it's like, we did that with Rocky 5. We did that with Creed. Just stick with Creed. Just stick with that franchise. I don't think we need to branch off, because it doesn't feel like a story that needs telling, And I guess, I could argue that when the rumors came out for the first Creed film, I was saying exactly the same for that. I was like, no, don't mess it up. Don't do a spin-off. This story doesn't need to be told. And they've proved me wrong. So Stallone kind of knows what he wants to do now with this franchise. And I trust it's in safe hands as long as he's helming it. But I did see what he did with Rambo as well, because I wasn't a fan of Rambo Last Blood. So I just don't want him to mess it up. Like, I know there's Rocky 5, and we did our thoughts on Rocky 5, and it is probably arguably the weakest of the franchise, but he's sort of like bounced back after that now, and it's found that established tone, and I don't want it to deviate too much. I want it to just stick with these characters. I like Adonis. I like Bianca. We've had the addition of Amara now, and that dynamic moving into the next film of him being a family man. And I think even maybe they were hinting that maybe Amara could potentially have a future with boxing or in the sport, sort of that like natural instinct almost when he was hitting the bag. I know she's a baby and probably wouldn't have any sort of like recollection of that, but there's the hints there that maybe she's going to be a fighter too. So maybe we'll have, in like decades time, we'll have Amara Creed, and it'll be like $1 Million Baby, or like the all-female led reboot of Rocky or something like that down the line. I think there's room there for an X1. However, it's like, you've done the Dragos, you've done the biggest dramatic plot point centered around this character of Creed. Where do you go from that point? If anything, the Dragos really should have capped off a trilogy, I think, and had that be the one that you build to. I don't know where they can go. There's rumors that, Clubber Lang's son, with Clubber Lang returning, but that feels too much of a retread of another father and son dynamic, of another villain. And don't get me wrong, it would be great to see Mr. T again in this franchise. It would. I'm not saying it wouldn't, but he doesn't really have any personal connection to them as a villain. That's Rocky, and he kind of beat him in 3 rounds, and we moved on since then. I don't know. And I think really the big thing, I think that the cancer stuff needs to come back. It feels horrible me saying that, but we need some kind of resolution to that plot point, and I feel like we need to say a final farewell to Rocky's character.
I'm in the same vein with you. There was talk of Deontay Wilder playing Mr. T's son. Granted, he may look like him hair-wise, facially. He can't really speak well. If you're going to be Mr. T's son, you need Mr. T, and then it's that dynamic of, as you said, we've had the iconic villain return with the son. the Dragos are the epitome of where this franchise needs to go. We've had Creed win his title. We've had him lose. Granted, he didn't lose on paper, but he basically lost to the Drago. Had him redeem the Drago. He's in Rocky 1 through to 4, but you don't need a Creed 5, essentially, i.e. the Rocky 5. I don't know what's left. Personally, Michael B. Jordan directing is optimistic for me because it's, again, let's give someone a shot. Let's give this actor a shot who's been acting since he was a teenager in The Wire. And he's probably wanted to go into directing. Why not give it a go with the Creed film? I don't know what on earth they can do or want to do. I think if they're going to bring Rocky in, do they then bring Rocky's family into it? How far do they go? And I'm not really sure what they can do. So I'm going to leave it up to them because there is room for another story, but I don't want an average to mediocre story. I need something that can cap off a trilogy. And the problem is that as you said, we've had the finale. We've had the Dragos. That is the final boss level. That final scene, the opening scene of this could have been a final scene of a Creed 2 to tease up a Creed 3. It's so similar to what's that villain, Whiplash and Iron Man 2, that it's the opening scene is his dad watching Iron Man's press conference. It's that kind of that personal story. I don't think we can have anyone come into Creed 3 that's going to have that effect. I don't think there's much that's been set up. I personally don't really know what they could do.
You're doomed either way, really. If you do, as I mentioned, the Clubber Lang stuff, you're repeating what you did in 2, and if it's a brand new villain, it's not really any stakes, is it? It's going to be like a Mason the Lion Dixon or Ricky Conlon again. It's just like they're serviceable, but it's not got that drama behind it. It hasn't got those stakes to it.
And I don't think Creed suits having an over-the-top cartoon villain either, which we love Rocky 3 and 4 for, but I don't think you can do that in the Creed film. So it's kind of a bit of a downer because I don't want them to do one, but I know they are, so I don't know what to expect. I think 2 could have ended it all perfectly, but I guess time will tell. I think this year, well, not this year, then over the next year, we'll get some announcements because it seems to be warming up towards August time, obviously, when films start going. Also, we mentioned future of the franchise. As of yesterday, the reports are that MGM is up for sale. Yeah. You've predicted this to me many a time over the last few months, and we've always said that there's going to be one studio that gets sold during this pandemic, and they're the ones trying to sell Bond for $700 million. They've basically got Bond and Creed, so dependent on what happens there, whoever picks up the rights, whoever buys the rights, could they cancel the Creed 3 or could they do Creed on TV? I don't know. But that's going to play into it over the next year as well, I think, which will be very interesting to see who goes for it.
I tell you what, it better not go to the mouse. Again, I thought there were laws against monopolies. Like they can't. They got Fox, they got Star Wars, they got Marvel. They can't take MGM. They can't get Bond and Rocky as well. I know that this guy's been in a Marvel movie. I know that the director's worked on a Marvel movie, one of the biggest Marvel movies.
The soundtrack guys working on their biggest production.
Yeah.
We're just advertising it to Disney. They're going to watch it.
Stallone was rumored to be in like a Guardians spin-off, wasn't he? Do you remember that?
Yeah, he's already been in an MCU film. Yeah. Anyone but Warner Brothers, because then we definitely won't get it at cinema.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
Speculation aside, I think that's everything I can say right now on Creed 2.
Me too. We're going to finish with our ranking video then. So I'm not happy with my list at all. And I always say this with rankings, especially with a franchise that I love, with pretty much at least 7 of the 8 entries that I love. It's really difficult, and my favorites would flip-flop day to day. My thought process as to why I've chosen what I've chosen without giving anything away is that I have just had naturally more time with the Rocky films than I have with the Creed films. And that's just going to be sort of what I'm going to cap off with this. So I'm guessing we're going to alternate, like my 8 pick, your 8 pick, and vice versa. We're going to work our way from least favorite to first favorite. And I've got a suspicion that our least favorite and our favorite might be identical, but we'll see. So coming in last at number 8, we have Rocky 5. Unsurprisingly, I'm not going to go too much into it. Watch our review, but I think unanimously across the board, a lot of people would agree with that assessment that it's the worst one.
It is the weakest of them, and it's the one you don't really need to ever go back to. It's there because it has to be. Off the record, I like 7 out of the 8 Rocky films, so what I'm about to say next for my number 7 pick might be the same as you, that the problem with ranking stuff, as great as it is, you always end up looking at something that's low down. This is like, this doesn't deserve to be there, but it's there because you love the others above it as much and more. So that's visored. No one do be upset with these because, as we said, we like 7 of 8 of these films. Shall I do my number 7?
Yeah, go for yours, yeah.
Let's get some controversy out of the way. I'm putting Rocky 2 as my number 7.
Oh, okay.
Nothing personal. I enjoyed it. It's just not done as much for me as the ones above it. I like some of what it was the most predictable one. This is the one where he has to become the champion. It's the rematch, and here's this character. I've got a lot of time for it, but it just doesn't have that rewatchability, and it doesn't have that personal experience that I have to the ones that I've put above it.
I've got quite a controversial pick as my number 7. I put Rocky Balboa at number 7, and I'm quite shocked that it's that low. And that's not to say that as I said, like I love pretty much all these films. Even Rocky 5, there's elements of it I love. The reason that I put this at 7 is watching it again. It's serviceable in what it needs to do, but it is very much member berries the movie. And the new stuff that it presents, with the exception of sort of Rocky's son, of Robert, which obviously comes into Creed 2 in a really good way. I don't care for the villain. I think that the circumstances leading up to the fight is ridiculous. We talked about the video game thing, and I'm glad that they didn't do that in Creed 2 as well and said, like, the rematch of the century, video game, Drago versus Creed. It's fine, but beyond that, I don't really get much from it. It was a perfect ending at that point, but again, like the style, the lighting, and the weird choppy edits that we talked about, there's something about it that just rubs me up visually the wrong way when I watch it. So I've got Balboa at 7.
I've got Balboa at 6 on mine. Only with Creed 2 on a technicality. It's the first Rocky film I saw. It was granted, it was an entrance at the latest entry point at the time. It was the one I went to see at the cinema, my first introduction to it all. And we had, as you said, the CGI thing. But I also really liked that concept of Rocky, and going back to it recently was that, wow, this hit a bit harder than it needed to emotionally. So I've got it just above Rocky 2 because I respected more what they wanted to do with that, wanted to close that chapter act. But obviously Ryan Coogler has changed history with that respect.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to do a switch on my list right now. You've convinced me with the Rocky 2 thing. So I think my number 6 pick is Rocky 2. So the things that I originally had on 6 and 5 are going to be bumped up. It's a great film. I love it, but it feels, the first part, Rocky doesn't feel like Rocky. The decisions he's making, I'm not agreeing with. And you know how he's just kind of flippant with his money when he's, supposed to be like saving for a house, building a family. I think we mentioned that it kind of takes us out of it a little bit. The rematch is great. And, it's cinematic as hell. It's emotional as hell at the end. Adrian, I did it. But I don't know. It feels too much of it was a natural progression for the sequel to go to, but it just, the first part of that, it takes a while to find its footing, I think, Rocky 2. So that's going to go at my number 6 spot.
I see that. My number 5, brace yourself, is a Rocky 3.
Okay.
Mr. T carries this film for me. I think it would be low without Mr. T. I kind of said that on that video that the mixed stuff, I don't think it worked too well. I love the Apollo Creed stuff, bringing him back into it. I loved everything in Mr. T, but I don't feel like there was as much there. As much as I love Thunder Lips, it was beginning into that, let's just have a really good time. Let's throw not cartoony because it sounds insulting, but Rocky 3 was a hell of a lot of fun. I just can't put it above the 4 I've got above it.
See, I know you're going in a different direction, and I agree, because my next one, number 5, is Creed 2. And I hear what you're saying with Rocky 3. I completely get it, and I agree, that's the thing, but I've just had way more time and more fond memories with 3. And again, if I was going to throw one on, like, would it be Creed 2? Would it be 3? It would entirely depend on what mood I'm in that day. Do I want like a film that's better written, better directed, more emotional, and better in pretty much every way? Or do I want the fun one with Eye of the Tiger and you owe me a favor, Stallion. What favor? All that stuff. With the amazing hair that he has in that film. And I'd probably go Rocky 3, Thunder Lips as well, Mr. T. But my number 5 pick is going to be Creed 2. As I say, I love this. As you can tell from the review, this is fantastic. This is one of my favorite in the franchise, but it's just a little bit lower than Creed. And that was the only place that I had to. I hate myself for doing it, but number 5 pick is Creed 2.
I get that. That's my number 4. Again, I didn't expect Creed 2. If I'd have ranked this a week ago, Creed 2 might have probably been 5th, but this had a very different mindset on me that second viewing. So Creed 2, it upped the stakes. It brought all the Dragos back. I think because it actually had character development. On this occasion, I'd rather watch something fun and entertaining, but I was shocked at how much, on a viewing a franchise together, Creed 2 had that emotional attachment to 3 different characters and key characters from the saga. So Creed nabs it just for that, but that's my number 4.
Nice. Unsurprisingly for me, my number 4, as I mentioned, just coming slightly above Creed 2, is the first Creed film. one of the strongest soft reboots. I mentioned that Plot Point Creed 2 was probably better for me and more enjoyable to watch, but I think there's just more emotion and it hit me hard. It hit me harder on that emotional level, essentially, than Creed 2 did. Creed 2 was great, but it didn't quite get me to that same place as the first Creed film. Obviously, there was the Oscar buzz as well with Stallone, which really helped for that. So number 4 is the first Creed film.
My number 3 is Rocky 4.
Okay.
I can't fault the film. It's incredible. It's pop culture at its finest. It's Rocky versus the Cold War. It's Drago versus Creed. It's everything the franchise became and epitomized. And if I was gonna, what films I want to chuck on, have a really good time, I'm probably actually gonna chuck Rocky 4 on over anything else. So it sits 3. This top 3 is a much bigger gap between 3 and 4 than probably 1 to 3. That's how tight. But a sacrifice had to be made, and it was this. But when we'll get to the next, eventually there's one film, if you're not figuring mine out by now, one of my films above it can only work because of Rocky 4, so it's got that invaluable respect.
Yeah, I get it. I know exactly the route that you're going with it as well. My number 3, you probably know which way mine's going as well at this point. Number 3 for me is Rocky 3, for all the reasons that I just mentioned, that it's where the cartoony stuff started to happen, but by God, I have some fun with it. And this is kind of where I mentioned that my bias for the Rocky films, and I did change Rocky 2. Originally, Rocky 2 was at my number 4 pick, just below this one, but in hindsight, the Creed films are better films. And the Creed films are better than Rocky 3. I will say that, but I just have way more fun with it. It's the characters that I've become accustomed to for all these years. It's just those extra years with those characters, I think, that's edging it out to me. And Eye of the Tiger, like, Jesus Christ, like one of the greatest songs ever. Get pumped every time I hear it. So Rocky 3 is at number 3, and I know where your list's going now.
Maybe for Creed 3, they can bring in like a John Cena type thing as a villain for an opening fight, and we can have some wrestling fight. That aside, Creed's my number 2. It's hard. It was always going to be in the top 3. Sitting down ranking it, it's just that the Stallone performance, the character arc, creating this film that should on paper be an absolute failure, that shouldn't be allowed to be made. But Ryan Coogler's come in. He's not just made a Creed film that looks and acts like a Rocky film. He's done his own film set in the Rocky universe. And to me, it's like a game changer. So Creed 2 nabs it purely based for that direction, writing, and Sylvester Stallone, that how he's wrote his character, what he did with his character arc. Again, everything works because of what came before it. Even jumping to Rocky 5, then back to Philly, Balboa having the restaurant, all these little things really come into it, and this film can't work without what's come before it. But it also had opened up enough doors to be its own thing down the line. So Creed's my number 2.
Yes, I agree. Like, it does deserve to be that high up, but for me, you know where I've gone with number 2. It's Rocky 4. This film maybe even more than any other 80s film for me, encapsulates everything that was about that decade. If aliens came down and for some reason said, tell me about the 80s, you just chuck them that film. It's a film that functions and operates and is edited like a music video. There are many music videos. There are many montages. The soundtrack's incredible. It's one of my favorite soundtracks to any 80s film at that time. It's over the top. It's cartoony. It's quotable. And if I just want to have fun and want to throw a Rocky movie on, it's probably going to be 4. I completely concede the point that it is definitely, if we're talking about in terms of writing and character development, it's probably going to be low down on the list, but it's just that enjoyment that I have with it, and that enjoyment did trump my decision on that one. So I've got Rocky 4 at number 2, and we have the same movie at number 1.
Absolutely. It was always going to be Rocky 1. It sounds horrible, but sometimes the best ones are the first one. And I keep saying that nothing works like what came before it. Rocky, I mean, it won Best Film at the Oscars. It's the ultimate. It's the American dream. Sylvester Stallone's sort of entry point to what he went on to become. I don't have a single fault against this film. It is stunning. As far as cinemas go, the fact I was able to sit down and watch it at a cinema before they shut. My last cinema showing of 2020 was,
maybe of all time.
Yeah, and you can't go wrong. The soundtrack, the score, the cinematography, the performances, everything, the relationship, Adrian Rocky is a perfect film. And you know what? If I was going to redo my favorite films of all time, I do it probably every 5-6 years. I have a sit down. I said, right, how would I do a top 20 as such? I think Rocky sits in there now more than it ever had. I think as I've grown up with them all, as you sort of grow older in life and look down upon life, you see more of those Rocky things, like where Stallone was in 1975 to be able to do something like that. It's the journey of both him and the character, and it has to be those.
I completely agree. I mean, I don't really have much else to add. To me, it's the ultimate underdog story. Arguably one of the strongest sports movies of all time, and the fact that it's just a drama, it's such a solidly written drama, as you said, put Stallone on the map and established him what he is today. And that film is the foundation, that is the cornerstone of everything else in the franchise should aspire to be, and the heart that that film captured and continues to capture to this day. 40 years on. Oh, that's it, 40 years on. Maths
44.
Yeah, like almost probably coming up to 50 soon, mid 40s, however long. And I think it's just a story that is so enduring and people will always be able to connect with. It's a very important film as well. So yeah, it's number one for me. We do have some people in the comments sharing their thoughts as well. Daniel states, I love all Rocky movies. I enjoy them all. I think it's pretty much like us. He gave his ranking. So at the bottom of the pack, Rocky 4, followed by Rocky 5, Creed 2, Rocky, Creed, Rocky Balboa, Rocky 2. Oh, hang on. Oh, we have a Rocky 2 twice. I'm not just seeing that, right? Where does Rocky 3? Oh, no, Rocky 3's there. Hang on. Rocky 4, 5, 2.
No, Creed 2. Creed 2.
Creed 2. There we go. And we have Hennick saying, I don't like Rocky 5, a few good moments, but that's about it. Yeah, that's kind of where we're at it as well. I do want to go back and bring up one of Carl's comments from earlier, though, because this is quite a nice one to end it on, I think. This was regards to watching Creed 2 in his first time watching it. He said, I had a passing of the torch moment with Creed 2, as this was the first film my eldest nephew asked me to take him to. He had a lot of questions about the history of Rocky on the drive home. And I said to him, I don't know if he has. I hope he's become a diligent Rocky fan at this point, and you've taught him well, and you've showed him the previous films. But that's awesome. And I think that it is kind of like, it is deserving of the title saga. You know, we talk about it with Star Wars, and I think it's true of this. Everyone's going to have like a new entry point into it. Star Wars more to a greater degree, I think, than Rocky at that point. But it is a film that you can share and you can have that history with and the connection with all the characters. I don't really have... Oh, hang on. Hennick's just given his one. We're missing an 8, my friend. There are 8 films in the franchise, unless you're not counting Rocky 5. You're just wiping it from continuity, which might be the wisest thing to do, actually. So,
and the release order, which we also appreciate.
Oh yeah, nice. So I think that kind of rounds us out with that. I think we've given our sort of very bittersweet conclusion to the Rocky films. This has been a blast going over these, as we said, like retro reviews. We knew that this was going to be probably the first one that we wanted to talk about. It is one of those massive franchises that, you know, we both have differing histories on, but we both love the franchise in our own way, and we did definitely want to talk about it on the channel. So I'm glad that we did. Even retreading and re-talking about Creed 1 and Creed 2, which we do already have reviews for, but it is nice to go back to some of these films and see if our opinions have changed, or if they've stayed the same, or if they've got better, and this show allows us to do that. So that'll take us out of Creed 2 and our goodbye to the Rocky franchise for now, until the next one comes out. But we have many more videos coming out. We have new franchises to go on to, and obviously, guys, feel free to request and recommend films that maybe we could do in this show of retro reviews. But we are going to be pretty much full for the next month. But we want to hear your opinions on the Rocky Saga. You've shared it. Some of you have come into like every video that we've done, and you've been chatting along with us, but open it up to everyone else. Be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, because obviously not just for these videos of Rocky, but the future ones we want to do, we want to get as many people in as possible to join in the conversation and share in whichever franchise we're talking about at that time. And shifting from one sports franchise to another by the same director as the first Rocky film and Rocky 5. We have the Karate Kid reviews, which we're starting. So we already have a review that we did on the 19th for the first Karate Kid. We'll have part 2 this Thursday, the 24th of December. That is Christmas Eve. Do we have a time for that yet? I don't know if I think it's probably going to be 8 p.m. Probably. It's the usual time that we tend to go live. I know that we went live at 10 for this. But look at 8 p.m. for that. That's Karate Kid Part 2 this upcoming Thursday. And be sure to follow us on socials for all the other release dates, because there's a lot of Karate Kid films that we need to get through, as well as entire series of Cobra Kai seasons 1, 2, and that'll be taking us into the 3rd series for Cobra Kai as well, coming to Netflix in January. Best way to follow us for times and when we're going to go live is us on our social medias. So Facebook at Cinema Savvy, Twitter at cinema_savvy. And if you'd like to pick up any of our merch, we do have a TeePublic link in the description down below. So feel free to check that out too. I think I've said everything. We do have one request. We will add it to the list. We'll create a document after this and we'll add it to it. We have a Planet of the Apes movies, Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. You might have to wait a bit like a year for the Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. It's coming. You just need to wait for it. But that'll do it from us, and we'll see you guys on the next video. Take care.